So as you can see, I've already taken the liberty of installing the motherboard. It's fairly straightforward. You of course just put your back plate on here, put the motherboard in, boom, tighten these screws up. I've also taken the liberty, and though you can't see it, I've put in the power supply in the bottom. It's just the two things I personally like to start with. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to get ready to install the Corsair H80i into the BitPhoenix NEOS chassis. I've done kind of a dry fit, and it's going to be tight, so I'm not quite too sure how things are going to work out, but we're going to go ahead and give it a go, alright? So first up, what we would do is we can go ahead and get our fan in there. I just kind of do it this way because of course now we've got to also try and fit the radiator in here, so I just like to go ahead and get everything. I just like to go ahead and kind of get this in here. That way this part's done with. The fan will now kind of hold itself on. Well, it's supposed to anyways, it'd be a bit easier. And now we can go ahead and put this in. Like I said, I've done a dry fit, and it appears that the easiest way to go ahead and get this on is going to be putting the tubes up towards the top. Now, as mentioned, this is going to be a real tight fit, but what I will do, and that is why I kind of put the screws on first, because now that is all there. And I can go ahead and tighten these screws, because now they're into the radiator as well, so we can hold this on here and go ahead and do that. So hold that on this so we don't need to. I'll go ahead and do this, and I'll be right back in a moment. Alright, so now as you can see, I've got the radiator, and unfortunately I've only been able to add one fan for now, because I don't think the second fan is going to fit inside our NEOS case. I'm going to go ahead and install the CPU block onto the CPU so everything's situated, and then we can reevaluate if the second fan will fit on or not. The H80 radiator is a bit thicker, so it's going to offer better cooling performance, but like I said, in these smaller cases you may have to go with one fan or the other, and unfortunately with the provided screws from Corsair, we could only set this up in kind of a pull configuration on the back, as our other screws would have been, the screws would have been too long to just situate the radiator onto the back of the case. So let's go ahead and get this all set up here. As you can see, if we can do this, that's our Intel bracket. And then to go ahead, as you can see, I've already put the back plate through for the Corsair H80i. It's as simple as moving a couple of little bolts around to the desired space you need them so they fit through the back of your motherboard, and then you go ahead and put your these screws in here. If you do it right, there should be a tiny bit of wiggle room in them if you go ahead and twist them. Not too much, but just enough to move them a little bit. Let's go ahead and get this get this wire out the way here. As mentioned, this is definitely a tight fit, a bit tighter than I would personally care for, but you know what, we're gonna get this installed here and see how it is. I'm gonna go ahead and finish tightening these screws on, and I'll be back to see if we can get the second fan on or not. Alright, as you can see here, we have the pump mounted down on the CPU, so it's time to see if we can fit the second fan on. And having a look at it, we can. But if you'll notice, I'll try to get my hands out the way. if we put this fan on as to begin with before putting the pump on or the base block onto the CPU, we wouldn't have access to the two thumb screws on this side. So for future reference, I think it's important to go ahead and just get the one fan and the radiator installed on the back, then get the CPU block on there with the pump and everything, and then try to take it from there, because we can always, as you saw, put the fan back on now. Now, one thing I had wanted to talk about was the 8-pin power connector. And on most motherboards, it's going to be up here in the top left. And as you can see, it's kind of hidden behind the radiator, which is not my main concern at this point. My main concern is the fact that my cable on my PSU, it doesn't reach. There's no hole right above it like there is on some motherboards. So we have to come over here through our main holes, as you can kind of hopefully see right there, the main holes in the middle of the board, and pull our cable through there and kind of stretch it across the top of the motherboard. As I said, mine doesn't actually reach this way, so I'll have to go ahead and get an extension to plug it on so it'll fit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and get the second fan on, and we'll take a look at some of the other stuff coming up shortly.